So, Jeff, welcome back.
Thank you.
Now
Thrilled to be here.
Yeah, now we consider you a South Summit regular. And I'm sure I mentioned to you already, our inside saying is once South Summit, always South Summit.
That's for sure. I see that.
I think you're experiencing that, the reality of what that is. So amazing to have you in Brazil, amazing to have you in Madrid, and now you're in our digital sphere with a deep dive on our podcast. So welcome, welcome. Jeff, there's so much to kind of touch on, but I'd love to kind of start at the beginning. And I suppose you spoke a little bit about this in Brazil as well, but, you know, when did you catch the entrepreneurial bug? When was it clear for you that you weren't going to be in a corporate job or working for the government?
Always had it. I just didn't ever call it. I can't even spell entrepreneurial today, and I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I never use that word. But looking back, so I grew up with a single mom who had 4 kids and 3 jobs.
Wow.
And for me, I never wanted to put pressure on my mother. So again, I would have never called it entrepreneurship, but I was early on. This is an example. As I would go, one time I went down, it was a change from football to baseball, and I needed new shoes. My mom's already working around the clock. We're poor. Right, I grew up poor with nothing. I don't want to bother her and stress her more. So I walked down the street in the hot sun, and I knocked on a neighbor's door, and I said, "Your garage is an embarrassment." And the man said, "What?" And I said, "Your garage is a mess, and all the neighbors can see it. That's embarrassing." And he said, "Did you knock on my door to tell me that I'm embarrassing the neighborhood?" I said, "Yes, sir." And his wife said, "Who is that?" And he said, "It's the kid from down the street." She said, "What does he want?" And he said, "To tell us our garage is the embarrassment of the neighborhood." And she said, "That's because you won't clean it." He said, "That's because it's 1,000,000 degrees out." And I said, "I'll do it for $20. So that is what I did really my whole childhood. And later I figured out if you want something in life, I wanted those shoes, and you're willing to work hard and you can do something that has value to someone else, that's what entrepreneurship is. I just didn't know that. But looking back, I wound up finding a way to fund things I wanted to do to keep pressure off my mother by doing something someone will pay you for.
Incredible, incredible.
So I always had that sense of what entrepreneurship is.
Yeah, incredible. Just kind of natural raw talent really as well, and necessity, I guess, a certain element.
Well, the marketing part anyway.
Yeah, well, there you go. Creating a need. That's absolutely beautiful. Creating your own market down the street. And you've been involved with so many disruptive companies that have really transformed industries. You know, I'd love to touch on this theme of, you know, crazy ideas. Like one thing is going out and making a buck and understanding you have those skills. Another whole thing is, you know, a visionary kind of product development, almost thinking, how do we transform these industries with the guts then to go for it?
It's really, you're right, because the guts part is not accepting what everyone else accepts. So literally give you the example of my first startup ever. I quit that corporate job. I'm 20-something years old. I'm broke and I'm unemployed. My mom can't feed me. And I bought an airline ticket. And back then, you had to check in with a human being that you gave your ID to, and they printed a boarding card, right? So you could get on the plane. And I was in the line for an hour and a half, and I missed the flight. And I was very upset.
Wow.
And I said to the woman, why do we have to stand here in line for an hour and a half for you to, the check-in, boarding card is just a printer. I said, you're just looking at my ID and hitting print and handing out boarding cards from a printer. And she's like, next customer. And I said, well, I'm trying to understand. Why do we have, if it's all these people are in line for one printer, why don't you just put a printer out there and I'll get my own boarding card? And she said, it doesn't work that way. People behind me are like, yeah, that's not how it works. And I said, I was thinking, that's not how it works because you're all accepting that. And I said, why isn't there a way to check myself in? And she said, because there isn't, and it doesn't work that way. And again, all the people were like, that's not how check-in works. Get out of, if you don't like it, don't fly. And so if you accept what everyone else accepts, just the way things are and complaining about it, it'll never change. But I actually went home that next day and I took out a pen. And so, when you go to the airport now, those check-in kiosks, that was my first invention. And everybody I told said, you can't do that. It doesn't work that way. So the big part for entrepreneurs is just not accepting what everyone else is okay with. And I was like, I'm not okay with that. And I'm going to figure out a way that I can check myself in. And fortunately, those kiosks are in every airport in the world now.
Incredible.
But if I had listened to what I was told,
Exactly.
I never would have tried that.
It's too funny. And is that motivation, which is stronger? Is it the frustration that I have to resolve this because this is so ridiculous, it can't just be like this? Or is it the need to create something new? Or is there something overriding fear of failure there?
No, I think you hit it right. It's when those things collide, right? For me, I know this is a problem. In all these years of living, I've made roughly 0% progress on my problem, which is impatience. I'm always
Right.
the one in line saying, how can this take so long? Why are we still standing here? So impatience is a problem for me, but it's also the opportunity. So part of it is, it drives me nuts when things are inefficient. That's a DNA thing, right? I'm standing there thinking, why do we have to wait for her to check us in? But you are correct that the other part is that you see opportunity to make impact, right? When you can envision an airport, I'm just stick with that example, where all these people are just checking themselves in kiosks and they're not in these big giant lines anymore, you see that you could have an impact on making something better. That's a driver. So they both come together. I'm frustrated with the way it works, but I'd love to be able to make it better because that means something to me to walk through an airport. People now, sometimes people will be in the airport checking in, and they'll put their arm around a kiosk and take a picture and text me. It just says, thanks.
Dude, I'm going to be doing that. 'Cause I didn't have a clue, and I adore those
And I was
machines.
like, I don't hate that
can't do
because
lanes.
if you helped for any entrepreneur, if you did something that helped make somebody's life better, that's actually lasts longer than the money does.
This is amazing because now I'm seeing some kind of pattern emerge. So your impatience can be your strength and your weakness.
Absolutely.
No, your little superpower, which is like the spark to activate you to maybe identify an opportunity or get going or have that overriding need to change something. And then when you see the impact of that change and how it's facilitating and improving people's lives, that must be incredibly rewarding and feeds the loop.
Feeds on that. Somebody yesterday said to me, not realizing how much this meant to me, when we started, Priceline.com in the US was before it rolled into Booking, et cetera, et cetera. But when we started, obviously we're building a company to make money, right, and take care of our shareholders, et cetera. But there was more. As a child, I had read a quote from Mark Twain. Mark Twain said, "Travel is the fatal enemy of prejudice." And I remember I went home to my mom and I was like, I know this is life-changing for me. I just don't know why. This meant something to me. And my mom said that what Mark Twain was saying is if more people could get out of their bubble and spend more time in the world with people that don't look like them, it'd be a better world because you'd have less hate and ignorance getting to know people. And I was like, that's got to be the rest of my life. So that was an important thing to me. So the part that people didn't understand is when we were building travel companies was we were trying to make travel more accessible to more people.
Wow.
And so
Okay.
that impact. So yesterday, literally yesterday somebody said to me, we've done more travel because of what you created than we did before you created it. They said, you've made travel cheaper for us and we travel more now. And I was like, actually, that's all we ever wanted to do. That's a big deal. So when you find out you can have a positive impact, it's like throwing gasoline on the fire.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's a beautiful motivator because travel is like the ultimate educator and equalizer now,
I think
isn't
so,
it? In
too.
that sense, that's beautiful because I had no idea that was kind of a spark of inspiration for that company. You never really know, right? I have a favorite entrepreneur here I adore who's a wonderful friend, had a ticketing company, and I was like, why ticketing? He's like, well, we did the research and it was the biggest online sector in terms of revenue and turnover, and that was it. You know, it's like no passion for events or commons or culture. It was just Celtic. It's what sells, you know. But that's really nice.
They both
That's really
count.
nice. Yeah, of course.
But if you can sell something that actually has an impact, that's really cool.
Yeah,
like I said,
yeah.
The impact lasts way longer than the money does.
Yeah, that's wonderful to reiterate because I think, you know, especially the early stages of entrepreneurship, it kind of get lost in that mode of need to fundraise, need evaluation, need to exit. You know, it's like, well, okay, but
Why are you even doing all
Yeah,
why
why
are
are
you
we
putting
here?
yourself through all that,
Why
right?
Are we here? And actually, what's something that I can't put up with is delayed gratification. I'm like, my partner, are you waiting to sell a company to retire because you're not going to be happy then either if you're not happy right now? You know.
Totally agree.
You know, it's like
Totally
you've got to
agree. agree with
really
that.
enjoy the journey, right? Isn't that what it's essentially all about? And just shifting gear a little bit, Jeff, into the area of ecosystem, right, and entrepreneurship, because I guess you've discovered very naturally, in a very organic way, you know, the joys of entrepreneurship and the challenges and the ups and the downs, but the value that it can create and the positive impact it can have. And now you dedicate a huge amount of your time nurturing those ecosystems around the world. So, what are you seeing? Is it possible to replicate some of the success of Silicon Valley? Do you need to throw that away and look at how other ecosystems are operating? How do you view ecosystems, and how do you think you can go in and help?
That's a great and important question. One of the things that Silicon Valley did, which was a lesson for everybody to learn, was they socialized business. And as subtle as it is, a lot of times people don't really understand that. And what I mean by that is you would go during that time, you would go out there for a meeting, and you would go, even the restaurants. You're in Silicon Valley, and you would go to a restaurant, and it's just me and you, table for two, please. But they'd put us at a table with 8 other people. And I'm like, we're not with them. And they're like, and?
Too funny.
And you know why? The whole ecosystem there was structured around, let's all talk about what we're working on and see if we can help each other. So we're with 8 strangers, but they're all launching businesses and we're all talking about it. And he's like, I can help you with that. And I was like, I can help her with that. And she said, I know someone that knows that. They understood that a rising tide lifts all boats. Everybody else didn't. What I would see in other cities, I would say, tell me my idea. And he would say, well, she's standing right there. I don't want to say my idea in front of her. And I'm thinking she might have a way to help you. What they did well was socialize business. It's interesting because I was doing a talk in Kuala Lumpur, and the other speaker was the founder of Starbucks. And it was interesting because I said, jokingly, I said, congratulations on inventing coffee, right? And he said, I didn't invent coffee. And he said, in fact, my innovation wasn't coffee at all. He said, my innovation that made Starbucks successful is, he said, I created the first restaurant ever where you can sit inside a restaurant all day and run your company without ordering anything. Imagine if you went to a restaurant, got a table, and told the waitress, I don't need a menu, I'm just going to have meetings at this table all day. That doesn't happen. But he said, I created a space for small business to happen. That's pretty fascinating because that is what's in Starbucks.
Yeah.
A lot, people having meetings and businesses. So that's a Silicon Valley lesson, but that's what got me thinking about ecosystem. What does the design around an entrepreneur have to be to increase their chances of success? And so that's really the impetus behind the Global Entrepreneurship Network. So that's what I'm still chairman of it. And we decided that if we could help cities all around the world create ecosystem. Ecosystem is access to education. Ecosystem is talking to governments about labor laws, about taxes, about incentives for investment. So there's policy. Ecosystem is getting investors in that community to support local entrepreneurs. Ecosystem is getting people with experience to be mentors, right? All the things that help, that increase the odds of an entrepreneur to succeed. And so I'm proud of our team to say we're now on the ground in 200 countries.
Wow.
We have people on the ground in 200 countries trying to create an ecosystem that will improve that entrepreneur's chance of succeeding by giving them access to everything they might need to get their company launched.
And did you find that support system critical yourself as an entrepreneur over?
Interestingly, I did by not having it,
Wow.
right? Just like I never had a mentor. And
Yeah.
some days I would be sitting there figuratively in the wreckage. You know, they say being an entrepreneur is like jumping off a mountain and trying to build an airplane on the way down. There were a lot of days I was at the bottom of the mountain bleeding, right?
Smash.
Broken bones, blood, shattered glass, laying there thinking somebody probably could have told me I should have turned left and not right here. So I would think about that ecosystem. Who could have helped me avoid this problem a lot, which is why I personally made the commitment, which is why I traveled those 200 countries
Yeah.
to try to help entrepreneurs and create that ecosystem around them, because every time I did something wrong or failed, I was like, somebody knew something that I needed to know, and I don't have any way to find those people.
Yeah, so kind of long, expensive, difficult learnings as
Yes.
opposed to
Yeah,
kind of
I did it the
sharing
hard way.
knowledge and
Yes.
experience, figuring it out as you go, I guess. And 200 cities is mad. That's amazing.
It still
Congratulations.
blows me away every time when we got to 100 and then 130, then 150. And We're now
I
doing
think
this
it
in
is
200
astronomical,
countries.
though, how entrepreneurship has boomed, which is just incredible. Even South Summit is 13 years old now. It's their 13th edition in Madrid. I think we ever imagined that it would kind of get this big in terms of Europe or regionally or our parts of the world and globally.
You know what's really driven it a lot, and it's funny since I'm an entrepreneur and we run one of the world's biggest entrepreneurship networks. I don't actually like the word anymore. I would rather call it self-determination, because the beauty of being an entrepreneur is not making some money. Obviously, that counts, or having your own little office or business. The beauty is being able to design the future, right? And while everyone else is waiting to see what the future will be, entrepreneurs saying, no, I know what the future will be because I'm actually about to go build it and design it. But that's also the case for your life. So I know I've talked to you about this before, but when I was growing up, all I wanted to do was travel as a poor kid with a poor mom and growing up in the middle of nowhere. I just wanted to see the world. And everybody I told that to said, dude, there's no job they're going to pay you to fly around the world. But what I kept thinking is, okay, you're right, so I'll just make that job, right? I wanted to travel around the world. So guess what? Why don't you build a travel company? Well, you know what happened with those kiosks? I remember the first call, KLM Royal Dutch Airlines. By the way, I didn't even know what country that was. Called me and said, can you come to Amsterdam? And I was like, for what? And they said, we heard about these kiosks you're building and we'd like to see it. And at that point, I was a broke entrepreneur, and I said, I can't really afford airline tickets to Europe. And the guy's like, what part of Royal Dutch Airlines did you not hear? He said, just go to the airport and get on the plane. I was like, wait, this is cool. I get to Amsterdam. I'm showing them the prototype demo of the kiosk, and they're like, anyway, we could talk you into staying in the Netherlands for a couple of days so we could give you a tour of our country. And I was like, okay, this must be a prank show, because all I've ever wanted to do is travel. On the way out, they're like, Mr. Hoffman, don't forget your check. I said, my check? They said, we want to buy your product. I said, wait, I'm getting paid for touring your country? And it turns out, yes, because if your goal in life, whatever it is, if your goal in life is a future where you want to see the world, right, then perhaps you start a business in that industry where your job is to do that thing. So that's what I try to tell entrepreneurs. It's really about self-determination. Envision a future you want for yourself, and then hopefully for changing a whole industry, and then go design and create that thing. That's entrepreneurship's not a job; it's a privilege to get to do that.
That's incredible. Yeah, I love that's a self-determination aspect. And I guess it's also interconnected, like your personal life, your private life, family, culture, upbringing, and your professional trajectory. You know, maybe we should start thinking about it a bit more holistically. You know what I mean? It's interesting. Because they really impact one another. I think things are going well in your personal life, things can go really well in your professional life. Ironically, for me, funnily enough, when I started building a family and having kids, I was very anxious about the step back professionally. Oh my God, this is going to stop my career. How are we going to combine these things? And actually, almost the opposite happened, because when you got to prioritize,
right,
and you suddenly have way less time, you become far more efficient.
That's that old.
I've hired a whole bunch of moms as well over the years. They're so freaking efficient.
They're good multitaskers. That's that whole thing about if you want something done fast, give it to the busiest person.
Yes.
People are like, wait, that doesn't make sense. Yes, it does.
Yeah, you want something done, give it to a busy person.
and that's also part of why, the talk that I'm giving today at South Summit, one of the big parts of my talk is about the importance of team, right? Because you are going to have up and down moments, and you are going to have time that you might be having a next child and you can't work the hours you work, but your team can. So as long as you have a team that covers for each other, and if you, in fact, the other thing is even more true. If you don't, you're never going to succeed. Mm-hmm. You have to have a strong team around you.
Yeah, of course. And it's interesting. Funnily enough, my partner is a high-end chef, right? So when they started Michelin-star restaurants, it's all about the finest ingredients, not limiting anything. And his current business is totally the opposite. Absolute at scale, limited on price, product availability, has to be locally sourced, has to be fresh, non-processed, etc., etc. The limitations have resulted in them being so much more innovative. Because they really had to be more creative in how they were building things. And I find that as well with the team, the more constrictions you have in yourself, the more you can empower the team and the more opportunity they have to grow.
Absolutely. It's funny what you said about the limits, because I was just having a conversation with an entrepreneur here at the show about the fact that I think he was surprised that I said, I trust companies with less funding more. Because if you have less resource, you have to be more innovative, right? And sometimes money becomes a crutch. I've had times where I've walked through a company, and on the way out, I kind of said under my breath, overfunded, because I see no creativity, no innovation, because they have a lot of money in the bank.
Wow.
It's when a company is about to run out of money, they're like, we got to figure something out now. Innovation, hunger drives innovation a lot more than comfort does.
Yes, exactly. No, a little bit too comfy for creativity, perhaps. And listen, just to loop back to the entrepreneurial ecosystem, it's 200 cities is just blowing my mind. But as an ecosystem builder, essentially here at South Summit, we're always learning, we're always trying to improve things. What are the replicable learnings, I guess, you have from that kind of geographic scope? Are there similar issues? Are they different issues?
There are, of course, there are cultural issues in every country and different regulatory issues. I mean, things like hiring and taxation and, literally to your office space. There are definitely differences. But the similar issues, and by the way, it took many, many years of research and data collecting. We intuitively thought that, but what we've done over all these years is collect data. Like our organization puts out something called the Startup Genome Report, right?
Yep.
And that's a report looking at the data of what works in entrepreneurship. So we've been researching that part for a while, which is why I think the biggest benefit, like in the case of something like Global Entrepreneurship Network, is best practices, is shared best practices. So we have looked at what works and where it works and why. And that's where we started to discover, first of all, the educational part. So part of that report says, what are the best cities in the world to start a company in? Well, if you look at what causes that, is at what age do you become aware that you can solve problems yourself and not be a dependent citizen? And so that's the educational system. So as an example, in an ecosystem, do they teach entrepreneurship? Is there a degree, courses in entrepreneurship in university? Are there entrepreneurship clubs in the high school? Are there problem-solving classes in the elementary school? If those things are all yes, that is a community that will have more entrepreneurs and better entrepreneurs. So as an example, we go to the countries that do that really well, and we share that with the other countries. When they say, why did they get such a high rating? We say, because they're doing these things, and here's how you can do them. So sharing the best practices, the same goes with investors. How did you build a business angel network? The same goes with policymakers. When we meet with, presidents, and you had one of the ministers. What was she?
Here yesterday.
Yeah, at the Leaders Forum. There was one of the ministers there. But anyway, when we're talking to ministers in countries, for example, or presidents and prime ministers, many times, the question is, the countries that do this best, what are they doing that we're not? So obviously that all includes the entrepreneurs, but the goal was to collect the best practices and then make them available so everybody's sharing what they've learned.
Amazing, yeah. And to be fair, Startup Genome is awesome. It's an incredible resource. So kind of building that template, I guess, is super useful for everybody to kind of learn from and accelerate that learning, I guess, as you're building out the ecosystems. Just to wrap up, I'm not going to ask you about your tech trends because that's just kind of standard. But, again, so much more experience. I hope you have more time on your hands now. I don't know, but I hope so. I'm sure you can't resist but fill it with a bunch of interesting stuff and things you're frustrated by that you really need to solve. But what are your passions right now? What are you spending your time on? What are you looking at to the future?
Probably one of my biggest things that I focus on is youth. It was really interesting because I got a chance one day. I had no idea this was about to happen, but I wound up spending the day with the Dalai Lama.
Wow.
And I was like, what do I ask this guy? Because I have him for the day. He showed up at something we were doing because we were trying to make life better for people that live in refugee camps everywhere in the world. And the funny thing of him showing up was I said, I did no press conferences. We made no announcements. We're just trying to fix the problem of making life better. And I said, we never did any media or press release, so why are you here? And he said, Jeff, that is why I'm here. Wow. And that was kind of a cool moment for me.
Yeah.
But anyway, one of the questions I asked him, right, I was like, what do I say to this guy? It's the Dalai Lama. And so I asked him questions about changing the world, right, having impact. And he said something that was really interesting. He said, if you want to change the world, you would think the logical thing to do is go talk to the people running the world. And he said, except you're completely wasting your time. They will never change and they barely listen. And he said, Jeff, I know that you're focused on trying to leave the world a better place, and you found it. And he said, so my advice to you is, he said, spend all your time with the youth. Forget the world leaders. They're not going to change. Let them die off. But prepare the next generation to lead in a way that no generation before them ever has. And so that's kind of, my personal foundation is a youth foundation.
Wow.
So we spend all our time working on the mindset of young people so they don't behave like my generation did. So that's my biggest passion. I was recently in fact, I posted a picture of me with 3 4-year-old girls sitting, I was in a chair this big, but sitting at a little table, and I spent the morning with 4-year-olds, and underneath the picture, all I put was best meeting ever. Because the time I spent...
All board meetings should be like that.
The time I spent listening to their ideas of how the world should be, now they're only 4. That day I also went to a middle school, and I went to a high school and a university, but my biggest passion is talking to young people and just helping them with the mindset that they take on the world's problems, that they don't become dependent, and is that they lead in ways that my generation didn't.
That's incredible, because it's what wise words now from the man himself. and you're the messenger through that, so that's pretty two good messengers sending a pretty important message, which is incredible because it's nearly counterintuitive, and I think that is something that has impacted me, and I'm thrilled to take on board at South Summit. We obviously have our startup competition, which is like the jewel in the crown of our platform.
Sure.
And we've had a kids startup competition right since the beginning. So these are kind of kids from 10 to 13, and they go up on stage, they get the same prize, they get the picture with the president or the king or whoever's coming, they get the exact same treatment as our adult entrepreneurs, I guess. But we could go a lot further. I mean, we could go a lot further in terms of what we do, because for sure your kind of instinct is like, well, if we get the head of this company and the head of the company and we throw them all in the room, we're surely going to come up with a good idea. But, it's interesting, really, really interesting perspective.
And as you already know from that, the youth, we don't never give them enough credit, right? If you actually listen to them, they actually have ideas, right, that we tend to discredit, but they see the world without filters, and so they make suggestions we would have never made.
And at those stages of their lives, you actually can make an impact. You could be talking to a business leader 25,000 times over, and they may or may not get the message. But you can talk to meet a 5-year-old once, and they won't forget it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
So that's amazing. What words of wisdom to part on. Jeff, thank you so much for being with us again.
Thank you for
Surely
having me.
see you back. Now you're in the club, part of the family, so there's no escaping us for better or for worse. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.